Bob and I will be back at 6.
See you at 6.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight with what all agree is a tragic loss of civilian life in the war and the great debate over who is to blame, the U.S. or Saddam Hussein. An American attack on Baghdad before dawn this morning has left a large number of people dead. And for the first time since the war began almost a month ago, other people in other parts of the world have been able to see the death and destruction which can be caused when the U.S. strikes from the air. The U.S. describes the target as an air raid shelter in a civilian neighborhood which had been converted to a command and control center, a legitimate military target. They argue essential to Saddam Hussein's ability to make war. But they did not know civilians were sleeping inside. General Thomas Kelly said if the Pentagon had understood there were civilians there, there would not have been a raid. But many of the dead are women and children. ABC's Bill Blakemore filed this report, which was cleared by the Iraqis.
By the end of the day, about 200 bodies had been brought out of the Amaria shelter. Hundreds more are expected, according to neighborhood officials familiar with the shelter's use. But no one knows exactly how many. We found this man still waiting for final proof of the death of his 2 daughters. We could see plainly as the bodies kept coming out that they are children and women. The man said to us, "This is the product of your democracy." This air raid shelter is in the center of the Amaria residential district. None of the houses were hit. Many of the men waiting outside here have told us their wives and children have been sleeping in the shelter every night since the war began. Community leader and shelter supervisor Abdel Janabi told us there are absolutely no military personnel or military activities connected with the shelter, which is next to the neighborhood supermarket and school. He told us this will only increase the determination of the Iraqi people to fight to the end. The tragedy followed one of the heaviest nights of bombing on Baghdad yet. The Amaria shelter was hit in the center of its large roof, cutting through 10 feet of steel-reinforced concrete. By mid-morning, we were able to make our way down to the upper level of the shelter before heat and smoke stopped us. Rescuers carrying bodies of women and children out past us told us they couldn't believe anyone would choose this target. One said he'd take revenge even if it takes 10 generations. Several men waiting outside told us their wives took their children to the shelter just so they could sleep under the loud bombardment. One of the survivors, 12-year-old Mohammed Yusuf, who was sleeping near the door, told us the shelter filled up last night as usual with mothers and grandmothers, including his own, who are missing, and with many children. Hospital director Dr. Bogos Bogosian.
Is this in conformity with the international regulation? Just have a look. Please. Okay. Would you call this mercy and justice? This is the most horrible, the most cruel thing I have ever witnessed.
There were no restrictions on journalists as we covered this story today. We were able to talk with anyone we wanted to in and around the shelter and the hospital. Iraqi officials called it a great crime and said otherwise the event speaks for itself. This city is now preoccupied with the story of the Amaria shelter and the problem of where to find safety from tonight's air raids, which have already begun. Bill Blakemore, ABC News, Baghdad.
Ever since the war began, the emphasis of the U.S. military spokesman has been that their attacks are precise and that enormous pains have been taken to avoid civilian casualties. The video of the bombing attacks, which we've all seen, has reflected that precision. And last night in Baghdad, they hit exactly what they were aiming for. In Washington, they say they didn't see the people go inside. Here's our Pentagon correspondent, Bob Zelny.
U.S. military officials in Saudi Arabia delayed the start of their daily briefing as they conferred with Washington over how best to explain the event.
I'm here to tell you that it was a military bunker. It was a command and control facility. It's one of many that has been used by the Iraqi government throughout this operation. We have been systematically attacking these bunkers since the beginning of the campaign.
Neal said the U.S. had evidence from satellite photos and electronic intercepts to prove the facility was military. He said the roof had been reinforced and camouflaged and the building surrounded by fencing and military guards.
Was it not possible to tell that civilians were using it?
Well, obviously, it must have been possible, or we wouldn't have struck it. If we're not going after civilian targets, and it was an active command and control structure.
can you tell us what you think went wrong, if in fact it's true that hundreds of civilians were killed?
Well, from a military point of view, nothing went wrong. The target was struck as designated. From a personal point of view, I'm outraged that civilians might have been placed in harm's way.
In the U.S., Defense Secretary Cheney placed more emphasis on the civilian deaths.
I think you all know that we sincerely regret any damage or any deaths caused to the civilian population. We've done everything we can to avoid that. Our forces, I think, have done an excellent job of targeting military targets and avoiding collateral damage to non-military targets.
Cheney suggested Saddam Hussein may have consciously chosen to mingle civilians with military targets. At this afternoon's Pentagon briefing, officials said that during the Iraq-Iran war, the Baghdad facility had been an air raid shelter, but had later been refurbished as a military command center and activated recently after other command centers had been destroyed. General Kelly said that military vehicles had been observed outside.
Based on the intelligence we have, which I'm not going to go into, we feel, as I said, quite certain. I'm comfortable. I'm not comfortable that civilians got hurt. Believe me, I'm not. But I'm comfortable that that was a military command and control facility, and I haven't talked to anybody that isn't.
Kelly said that it was possible that civilians had gotten into the facility at night without being seen by U.S. surveillance, but that he had no evidence of that.
It is our policy right now not to strike targets where we know civilians to be. It is our policy to strike military command and control facilities. We've got to take a look at those two things and decide what exactly it is we're going to do in the future.
Military officials here can look back on the fact that 2 laser-guided bombs dropped from what sources here say was a stealth fighter hit a military target with flawless precision. But in looking forward, they are also likely to weigh the military value of hitting a secondary target in an urban area against the grave risk of civilian casualties. Bob Zelnick, ABC News at the Pentagon.
It's been a long day for many people trying to figure out all the details of this, and in wartime there are many questions which can't necessarily be answered, but let's try with a couple more. Joining us is our military analyst, Tony Cordesman. Tony, reporters on the ground in Baghdad said there was no camouflage on the building. In Washington, they say there was camouflage. How can you stand on top of a building and not see camouflage?
Peter, when you hit a roof with 2 2,000-pound bombs, you cover it in scrap and rubble, and you flake off the surface. There's no way anyone could see the light tans and dark browns of desert camouflage after it's been hit by bombs.
Now, military briefers today have said they have seen on occasion senior Iraqi military officials go into the building. They've seen their cars and their other vehicles around. How could they see that and not see civilians using it as a shelter?
Well, even though there are several hundred people in the building, they probably get in and out in a 20 to 40 minute period. And we only have snapshots by way of photo and electronic intelligence. They'd never get, under most conditions, an idea the building was being used as an air raid shelter.
And now try one more for us just on a military man's perspective. There could be more proof forthcoming from the Pentagon, assumedly, to make their case even further or even more strongly in world opinion. Why wouldn't they make the case more vigorously with further evidence?
There are 2 basic reasons. If you show photos that are really concrete, most people can't understand what they're seeing, and they give away a tremendous amount of detail on how good our intelligence coverage is. If it's electronic intelligence, you would tell Saddam Hussein exactly what frequencies we're listening to and exactly how well we can break his codes.
Okay, Tony Cordesman, thanks very much. We'll have more news in just a moment.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Folgers Crystals.
The new baby was up all night. Now you gotta make the morning right. Folgers always comes through. It's decaffeinated too. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup.
Folgers Decaffeinated is made with mountain-grown beans, which have more enticing aroma and richer flavor. So it's no surprise it really wakes people up.
Now you're off to a great start, 'cause Folgers warmed your heart. What a wonderful way to let the sun shine on your day. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup.
Poison ivy, insect bites, rashes. There are too many choices.
You only need one. Cordade.
Stop the itch and heal the rash with a brand doctors recommend most.
Present Arms.
Cordade, the only aid you need.
Well, we said this was a political act today in the eyes of many people, as well as a military act. Standing by at the White House is ABC's White House correspondent Britt Hume. Britt, does the White House, the president, see this as a political setback?
Well, I don't think anybody here would say that yet, Peter, but make no mistake about it, this has not been a good day when officials of this government all over town today have spent much of the time trying to explain how this could happen. And this only a day after the president himself, in a meeting in the Oval Office, made a very public objection to what he said was Saddam Hussein's attempts to propagandize this issue of civilian casualties. Obviously, the worst thing that could happen then would be to have these very, very gruesome pictures of very serious loss of civilian life come out the very next morning. And indeed, this morning in the White House, spokesman Fitzwater chose to do the first part of his briefing on camera, which is unusual. And in so doing, he tried to emphasize the issue of the loss of civilian life in a way that the military officials had not.
It saddens everyone to know that innocent people may have died in the course of military conflict. America treats human life as our most precious value. That is why even during this military conflict, in which the lives of our servicemen and women are at risk, we will not target civilian facilities.
Peter, it also seems fair to say that this is one of the consequences of postponing the beginning of serious ground action. So long as U.S. planes are roaming unchallenged in the sky and bombing whatever targets they want, there does seem to be the potential for more of this sort of thing.
Okay, Britt, thanks very much. Britt Hume at the White House. Anybody who's seen the pictures from Baghdad today has certainly had a reaction. We asked ABC's Judy Muller to test reaction around the country, see how people felt.
Americans had a new question to ponder today.
Iraqis say this was a civilian bunker, a bomb shelter. The United States government says this was a military command center and that any civilian casualties were purely incidental. Who do you believe?
In St. Louis, one answer.
Hussein probably put those people there knowing that we were going to bomb it, knowing that it was a military facility and that America knew that and that we would bomb it.
In Los Angeles, another answer.
I think it's very sad because they said there were mostly women and children, and they bombed the bomb shelter where they know that women and people would go for protection.
And others had no answer at all.
We don't know who to believe in a situation like this. It's been said over and over again that the first casualty of war is the truth. We're not going to know the truth until perhaps this war is over.
Who can you blame? I mean, it's really upsetting when so many people have to die and it doesn't seem there's any reason.
Some blame Saddam.
When Baghdad was complaining that we hit civilian targets, what did they do to Kuwait? Who started this whole thing?
Some blame the lack of information.
The American people have not been given the right perspective on this war. We haven't seen any blood over there. We've just seen aerial shots of bombs. We haven't really seen the devastation of war.
And others on this Ash Wednesday blame too much information.
It's not an exact science, and there are going to be some injuries, and I think the media has blown a lot of the things out of proportion.
And many Americans blame war itself.
I just think we have to do what we have to do sometimes, you know, and I think even though we don't like to see that happen, I think it is inevitable.
Americans may disagree on who or what is to blame, but one thing seems clear. The antiseptic language of war, as in surgical strike and collateral damage, has been replaced by very real images of destruction and death. Judy Muller, ABC News, Los Angeles.
We'll continue in a moment.
Ford Motor Company. Profiles in quality. Teamwork.
We work good as a team here on a job like this where all four of us can work together. That's what I said in '82. And today, teamwork is more important than ever.
Our paint job is only as good as a primer coat.
My primer coat's only as good as the body prep.
My body prep starts with a quality body panel. Together,
our goal is to build
the highest quality cars and trucks
in the world.
At Ford, quality is job one.
It's Color Tile's President's Day sale. Store-wide savings up to 67%. DuPont Stainmaster Carpet, incredible. Only $10.99 installed. And mini blinds, buy one, get two free. Tremendous reductions. On ceramic floor and wall tile. Entire stock Armstrong no-wax floors. Wood flooring and wall covering too. So hurry. Save up to 67% at Color Tile's President's Day sale. Sale ends Monday.
A lot of people can't wait until they retire. But I always liked my work. It worried me that when I turned 65, I'd have to leave. Rules are rules, and that was company policy. Then AARP helped get mandatory retirement eliminated. Now I can retire when I want to retire.
Bye, dear.
Not when someone else wants me to.
AARP, making a difference.
Because there were so many women and children who died today, and because the news spread like wildfire, there's a very good chance that overseas the U.S. will suffer its most severe political setback of the war so far. In the Middle East, the first reaction has varied, depending on how people feel about Saddam Hussein and the U.S., depending how free they are to express themselves. ABC's Jerry King is in Egypt, where there hasn't been much opposition to the war, but where news of the attack has been limited by the government.
A news anchor tonight gave a brief account of the bombing, but the government-run TV did not show pictures of the civilian casualties in Iraq. They were considered too inflammatory. Egyptians who were able to get more detailed accounts by listening to foreign radio broadcasts were upset, but not apparently at the U.S.
Why don't they target the man who is responsible for what is happening and leave with this, problem of targeting military where civilians are? It's creating a lot of trouble in the Arab street.
There was compassion for the Iraqi victims of the bombing, but these Egyptian taxi drivers were scornful of the Iraqi leader. This man asked, is it nice when he hits civilians and it's not nice when foreign countries hit civilians like he does? He's sad now about the 400 dead, said this man, but he wasn't sad about the thousands who died because of what he did in the last 6 or 7 months. Before today's bombing, many Egyptians who considered Saddam Hussein the enemy were sympathizing with the Iraqi people. The feeling was growing here that the Allies had gone too far. They can hit bridges and things like that and supply locations, this man said, but unarmed civilians, of course not. For most Egyptians tonight, even those in the opposition, the bottom line is still that Saddam Hussein is wrong. Jerry King, ABC News, Cairo.
In the Jordanian capital Amman, where anti-American demonstrations have become very common, several hundred people gathered tonight to condemn the bombing and denounce the U.S. Jordan's prime minister announced 3 days of official mourning for the civilians who died. The war against Saddam Hussein has splintered the Arab world in general. What overall effect, if any, will it have? This afternoon, we talked to Professor Rashid Khalidi of the University of Chicago. Dr. Khalidi, how many people in the Middle East, in the Arab world, will automatically give the U.S. the benefit of the doubt, will believe the U.S. version of today's events?
I think very few will believe the U.S. version.
And why is that?
Well, I think that you have a situation where we've had a struggle for meaning. What does this mean between the United States and Iraq? The United States wants people in the Middle East to believe that this is about Kuwait, and these are unavoidable actions in the course of the liberation of Kuwait. Iraq is trying to argue that what the United States is doing is to strike at Iraq, to deindustrialize Iraq, to destroy its infrastructure. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the images that have been coming out would tend to substantiate the Iraqi point of view for many people in the Arab world.
But people know Saddam Hussein. They hardly love him. Why do they automatically believe his version rather than Washington's?
One reason is that they're not just listening to the American media and the Iraqi media, and they have an independent check on reality, which is to say the accounts from refugees coming out and who are going back to Cairo or going back to Yemen or going back to Amman and telling what they have seen. And apparently what they have seen includes a lot of bombing, which has killed a goodly number of civilians.
How much harm do you think this does to the U.S. in the long run in the region?
If over time this kind of thing recurs, you will have a serious problem. I don't know if it's going to change any country's policy. I don't know if it'll make any government turn against the United States, but over time it will have a cumulative effect on public opinion, I think.
The initial reaction to the bombing in Europe, some understanding for the U.S. ABC's John Lawrence is in London.
Baghdad bombing, Iraq says 500 civilians died.
Europeans got the news on radio and TV today, but first reactions did not reflect any widespread surprise or shock.
I was a guy who went through the last war, and in the last war civilians got killed, and if civilians get killed, so be it.
In Germany today, bullets were fired at the American embassy in Bonn, but no one was hurt. In France, government officials said they deplore the tragic fate of the victims of the bombing. And in the British Parliament, a pointed question to the foreign minister.
Did it occur to him that some of the blood of these innocent civilians was on his hands?
There's no doubt that war has its tragedies, and sometimes these can be great, even with the greatest possible care and precision.
Supporters of the war here see the bombing as a tragic accident. Opponents of the war see it as a crime. John Lawrence, ABC News, London.
We'll have more news in a moment.
How do I know where to get my brakes done right?
Come to Midas. You get a lot of value for the price, plus peace of mind, knowing the job will be done right. That's why more people come to us for brakes, knowing that nobody beats Midas. Nobody.
We're about to prove a simple point. On the left, a steak wrapped in saran wrap. On the right, both Reynolds and Glad wraps. Now, knowing a tiger won't eat what a tiger can't smell, which one do you think holds in odor and freshness better? Saran wrap.
When your child reaches college, the cost of a degree could exceed $110,000. And sooner or later, the truth dawns on you. You probably can't count on an athletic scholarship. Not even a partial one. At Merrill Lynch, we can give you some coaching, ways you can improve your financial batting average. We call it College Builder. You'll call it a home run. Merrill Lynch, we're bullish on your financial future.
When creating the new G20 midsize luxury sedan from Infiniti, these were just a few of the amenities we kept in mind. Seating surfaces that are fitted with leather. A cabin that heightens the level of comfort and stretches the limits of space. Of course, with 16 valves and 140 horsepower, that mind also has an alter ego.
Do you have a cold?
Yeah.
Here are 2 cold medicines. One relieves these 3 symptoms, this 9. Choose one.
9.
Why?
That's me all the way down the list. Muscle ache, congestion, general body ache, headache.
You chose Dristan over Sudafed.
I am shocked.
Would you try Dristan?
Yes, I would.
How do you feel now?
Night and day difference, 100% better.
Dristan relieves 9 tough cold symptoms.
I love Dristan, yeah. It's great.
Elsewhere in the Persian Gulf today, Allied warplanes continue to attack Iraq inside Kuwait. B-52 bombers struck at Iraqi troop and armor positions just across the border with Saudi Arabia. U.S. artillery was also moved forward to the front in preparation for a possible ground war, and Marines brought in mine-clearing equipment. That's what you see there, which will be critical in opening corridors for ground troops and tanks if and when they move forward. On the diplomatic front today, Baghdad Radio said that because the Soviet Union voted with the U.S. at the United Nations, the Soviets bear responsibility for what the radio calls the brutal crimes against Iraq. Nonetheless, the Iraqis say that their foreign minister, Tariq Aziz, will go to Moscow for talks with Mikhail Gorbachev. One of Mr. Gorbachev's closest advisors, just returned to Moscow from Baghdad, says he now sees reason to be slightly encouraged by his visit. Here's ABC's John McCarthy.
When Soviet envoy Yevgeny Primakov returned to Moscow this evening, he said there are reasons to think more optimistically now about the possibility of a ceasefire. He refused to be specific, saying that with Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz coming to Moscow for talks with President Gorbachev early next week, negotiations will be continuing.
I don't want to jeopardize the process of negotiation for future. That's why I don't want to go deeper into details.
Primakov claimed to have told Saddam Hussein that Iraqi troops must withdraw from Kuwait, But the Soviet envoy hinted he may also have promised to address what he called a whole host of other problems in the region. Analysts say that could mean the Israeli-Palestinian problem, which the U.S. refuses to link to settlement of the Gulf crisis. U.S. officials say they don't yet have details of Primakov's visit, but they support the Soviet effort as long as it does not retreat from Security Council positions.
More power to them if they can get through to Saddam Hussein and he abides by the 12 United Nations resolutions.
But privately, U.S. officials are expressing concern that Moscow may be considering giving ground to Saddam Hussein to try to stop the fighting and to better position the Soviet Union in the Gulf after the war. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
On Wall Street today, the rally resumed. The Dow Jones Industrials gained more than 34 points and closed at 2909. The trading was heavy. In other news, the Bush administration has unveiled a 5-year, $105 billion transportation plan. The money is supposed to help rebuild the interstate road system. The proposal would also give state and local officials more discretion to use some of the federal money to help pay for mass transportation. We'll be back in a moment.
So don't tell me about waiting. What if we'd waited for the other guys on driver's airbags? You remember that? Too soon, too expensive. The public doesn't want them. You remember? We put them in every car we build in the U.S. It's standard. And we didn't even price for them. And now I got a pile of letters saying, thanks for saving my life. And other guys in the industry are saying, we'll have them standard too. Maybe in 1994, maybe 1995. Then what did we hear? Wait on airbags for minivans. Nobody puts an airbag in a minivan. It's too tough to engineer them. Well, we did it anyway. No waiting. They're here. Sure, people still have to wear seatbelts with a minivan airbag. So what? Everybody should wear a seatbelt. No, some things you wait for, some things you don't. Minivans with airbags, you don't wait.
Take a look around me at a place like none on land. Sail away now, you'll find me. The world's at my command.
Of all the resorts in the world, one takes you to the great places of the world. Royal Caribbean, the grand resorts of the 7 seas. Isn't it time you discovered them?
You can pledge your support for our soldiers by helping a military family here at home. Please call the Channel 2 On Your Side support line at 242-9200.
We saw a very different side of the war today, the evidence that precision airstrikes do not guarantee that civilians will not be killed. And in Baghdad, apparently about 200, many of them women and children, were killed when the U.S. Air Force struck overnight. The U.S. says it is sure that the building was being used by the Iraqi military as part of the command and control system in the war effort. That is our report on World News Tonight. We'll have an update every hour on the hour about the Gulf War. There will, of course, be more later this evening on Nightline. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.
And now, the news continues with Channel 2 News at 6.
Well, the rumor is a fact tonight. The governor wants to impose a state income tax. Good evening. I'm Bob Mueller.
And I'm Ann Holt. The debate is set to begin about whether Tennesseans will okay a 4% state income